Grand Canyon University presents a video production labeled Professional Dispositions of Learners by a graduate student, Nicole Ortega. Good afternoon. My name is Nicole Ortega. I am a graduate student completing a master's program in counseling with the education program at Grand Canyon University. In today's video, we're going to go over dispositions of a professional counselor, what qualities and behaviors are indicative of a professional counselor. We will be reviewing all of the different dispositions of successful counselors and how they demonstrate the ability to understand diverse cultures, genders, and learners to build a strong relationship between our students and their families. Lastly, we'll go over what I currently possess, I feel I possess as a educator going into the counseling field, and what I need to work on prior to my first year in counseling. Lastly, I will report feedback to let me know what I will need to do to guide me in the correct pathway to becoming a counselor and having a successful career. Being an effective teacher is just like being an effective counselor. There's so much more than just listening to a scholar and counseling them. You have to take in consideration high expectations for the scholars. You also have to take into consideration the respect for all cultures and making sure that you celebrate and embrace those different types of diversities. Fairness is important as well in between two students with conflict issues. You also want to take the time to always reflect and make sure that you do go back and find any errors or need of improvements. Curiosity would be creating higher order questions for the scholars, making sure that you incorporate why they may feel the way that they feel. Why are they doing what they're doing? You'll see this a lot as an educator, creating that high order thinking, making sure that you kind of have them think outside the box. Honesty is always key. You always want to make sure that you're honest with your scholars and you become a leader. You want to always show compassion, dedication, and instill that into your everyday counseling practices can also make you or myself into this career path very successful. When I first began my experience in the educational field, I began as a science tutor at Huey Elementary School. I began to see the everyday struggles with scholars in 5th grade, and I began to realize that teaching was going to be for me. I then pursued a career as a SAC teacher, which is a special assignment class. In the special assignment class, scholars are usually placed in school suspension. It's a disciplinary action due to a behavior that they have committed. In this committed behavior, they also have to reflect what they've been doing wrong, how they can improve, what they have for goals. So this is when I began to realize that counseling might be a better option for me, but I did know that teaching was going to be the first step prior. I'm glad that I did go into teaching. This is my 2nd year as an educational teacher in science. I have realized that high expectancies from students is what's going to be key. I also realized that you have to be fair across the board. I do also see why you would need to teach prior to being a counselor because of the way that everything's set up. It's almost like a foundation before you begin counseling. Therefore, I'm hoping to pursue my dream as a counselor and being able to help aid in students' behavior and helping them obtain goals to be successful in life. The 3 dispositions that I feel that I currently possess are advocacy, compassion, and dedication. I feel that I possess advocacy because I work really hard with my scholars to build a positive relationship with them so that they can feel that they can come to me other than just core content issues. So if they feel that they're going through any bullying issues or that they feel that they're going through some struggles at home and they might need somebody to vent to or talk to, I constantly try to engage with them so that we kind of go outside the classroom culture and they find a resolution to their problems. I also try to deal with students that are facing any issues or challenges that might be outside of their range. And of course, when I have a student that's usually very quiet or individual, I really do work hard to kind of find their interests, see what they're into, whether it's the Rick and Morty shows or maybe they're really into muscle cars, anything that's going to kind of incorporate that. I try to even implement it into my lessons, and I might call on that scholar to read that problem of the day so that they can feel that we have that connection and they're actually able to have an escape in my classroom and feel that I care about them genuinely and not just see them as a number or another student for a new year. Another disposition I feel that I possess is compassion. I feel that I work really hard to make sure that my students understand that I do care about their success and that I genuinely find whatever they're into interesting. I also work hard to make sure that I greet them every day upon entering my door, whether it's a high five, calling them by their name firsthand. I work really hard to make sure that I know all their names within the first 2 weeks of school so that they can feel special. There's a difference between saying hello sweetheart and or hello mijo and changing it to hi Malachi or what's going on Marquise. It makes them feel more important and it makes them feel like they have a special place in my classroom. I also make sure that I know them beyond the academic picture, whether they lost their father, maybe they lost a family member, maybe their dog died last week. I try to take compassion into it so that way I can also consider how they're feeling that day. We also incorporate thumbs up or thumbs down. So I always tell scholars, if you're having a bad day, let me know so I can also incorporate that with a PLC and let my other colleagues know, hey, you know what, this morning so-and-so is not doing so well today, so if you can just kind of keep an eye on him or just let him know. And I think that makes the difference with being an effective teacher. So I really want to incorporate that as an effective counselor. My last disposition that I feel that I possess is going to be my dedication to the program. I feel that I am dedicated because I always take my T-test feedback as an educator to the extreme. I always make sure that I constantly reflect in a journal daily. I observe other classes to see what ways I can implement different practices. I also enjoy taking constructive criticism. I never take it personally. I always take it professionally. I definitely always look to improvise. I don't follow the stream. If it's not broken, it can't be fixed. I always strive for improving. I always ask questions to colleagues and supervisor to ensure my success in my classroom. Therefore, as a successful counselor, I'm hoping to implement the same and become an effective counselor. A current situation that displays these dispositions that I reflected on was a scholar recently in my classroom while I stepped out decided to slap another student on the buttocks area while we were cleaning the beakers. Therefore, at that time, due to my advocacy, I had 2 scholars inform me about the incident outside because they felt comfortable telling on the particular scholar that committed the incident. Therefore, I went ahead and I investigated. At that point, I was able to show compassion to the students and also to the victim that was smacked. At that point, that scholar also resided in me, even though he knew what he had done. We found a solution and we were able to basically use feedback to help that scholar obtain goals and understand why it's not appropriate to touch another scholar or put their hands on another scholar. In this particular situation, I also took time, reflected back, and thought to myself, was there anything I could do differently? Because I was really disappointed in myself for stepping into my prep room to wash the beakers. However, at that point, I did realize that as an educator, there is going to be times where you do have to step out or your back is turned because you're constantly trying to hit different differentiated strategies with your scholars, and things can happen whether you're in front of them or you're slightly in another room or you're washing any experiment materials. At that point, you have to take that criticism and work on it and decide on yourselves, how can I implement a better classroom management so that these scholars feel like they cannot be doing those things, whether you're looking at them or whether you're on the side, but just enough to know that you're not just disrespecting yourself, but you're actually disrespecting the educator's classroom. So I feel that these dispositions are definitely strengths that I have because I was able to utilize all 3 in just this one scenario. Like I say, I had the advocacy, I had scholars entrust in me to know that I wouldn't use their names to come back, and I know them on a personal level to know that they're honest. I had compassion for the scholar of the victim as well as another scholar so that way they could utilize some help for me. When thinking of dispositions, it's healthy to think what can actually build stronger relationships. So how the modern education system works nowadays, we actually have a lot of diverse landscape with our students from all backgrounds. And particularly my campus that I currently work at actually deals with a lot of military scholars. So we get from Oklahoma, Hawaii, Alaska, and in this particular background, you'll see different ethnicities. So it's important to kind of gather their background, and especially with the TEKS that I go over in genetics, it's a little bit more accepting and well-rounded because I live in El Paso, Texas. We're a border city, so we do have Juarez, which is our border town, our border city. And along with our military students. So mixed together, they have this nice foundation, and it's a well-rounded community in which everybody helps each other and they have respect for their cultures. We also see how having this disposition puts me in a position to be a role model for my particular position. As an educator, you have to be a role model. You have to set the example because you are molding these students into our future. So how do we want our future to look? That expectation should come from their schooling, and your schooling is represented by your educators. And when they run into issues, your counselor should be that role model for them. What they envision as a role model is what you expect them to be. So they'll have a starting point of view in which I feel that I set the bar for. But after that, I do try to engage my students to tell them to be their own role model, be their own successful hero. What do they want to see when they see a role model? Is that them? I also piggyback off of what they say and what they do want to see so that way I can represent that for them. Lastly, I will talk about motivation and how student learning will be affected because I possess these dispositions. So if you're motivated and if you represent what you're talking about and you not only talk the talk, but you actually walk the walk and you have goals that need to be obtained and these students see you reaching these goals as far as the compassion and admiration, that is one thing that I do admire as feedback from my students when I do talk about working on my dedication. I always ask my students to leave a parking lot ticket so they actually give me the feedback, and that incorporates me to be a better person and also work on whatever they might be struggling or any concepts that they see that they did not like in that particular class lesson. So if I was able to implement that as a counselor, I feel that would also hold a higher standard for myself because I possess it. Therefore, I feel that student learning can grow from these different feedbacks. So if I use that data, I'll be able to better utilize it in the school community. When working on feedback's important because without feedback or taking feedback into consideration, you have no growth. No growth means no change. No change means no improvement. And how can you be an effective counselor if you're not striving to improve yourself? 3 dispositions that I feel I really need to work on is reflection, fairness, and curiosity. Reflection, because while I exhibit having feedback given to me, I feel like sometimes I really need to take the time daily to work on reflections. Sometimes there's just not enough hours in a day, and I feel if I was really to work on reflections daily, I could really improve myself. Fairness is a little tricky for me because there is times where students do tell me certain things and I know consequences come with them, but I struggle that in-between part with that rule basis. Sometimes I feel like, well, you do know that you did wrong, so do we have to follow through the consequence or can we go with a warning? I feel like that is something that I need to be a little bit more firm about. Lastly, it's going to be curiosity. Although I do feel like I do help my students have that higher order thinking, I feel that I also need to help the scholars that already have that higher order thinking and challenge them just a little bit higher just so I can help them succeed. And creating those next level thinking questions could really help ensure that success of that scholar. Lastly, like I say, it's important for my growth because I won't be able to grow as an educator or as a counselor if I'm not implementing my weaknesses. It's great to have strengths, but you need to also learn to strengthen your weaknesses, especially in this career and field. Lastly, I just want to say thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be living my dream on my journey to becoming an effective counselor, especially in this day and time.